Elira never expected her name to be written in gold on someone else's wedding invitation. In the buzzing streets of Surulere, where life moved to the rhythm of danfo horns and early morning prayers, Elira lived in the shadows of her stepmother, Mama Nsia, and her stepsister, Amma. While Amma flaunted lace gowns on Instagram and attended bridal expos in Lekki, Elira scrubbed floors, fried puff-puff to sell, and nursed her dreams quietly. Her late father's house, once filled with books and music, had turned into a place of silence and servitude. When news broke that Rael Obede, the heir to a real estate empire in Ikoyi, was seeking a wife, Mama Nsia was determined that Amma would be the one. Despite rumors of Rael being crippled from a car accident, his wealth made him desirable. The family was invited for a private introduction, but to everyone's shock, after the meeting, Rael sent word that he did not want Amma. He wanted the quiet girl in the corner, Elira. Humiliated and desperate to salvage the alliance, Mama Nsia made a decision that would change all their lives. Elira would go in Amma's place, veiled and renamed, to marry Rael under false pretenses. "Do it for your family," Mama Nsia hissed. And just like that, Elira was stuffed into borrowed wedding lace, her name erased, and sent to become the bride of a man she had never spoken to. As the gates of the Obade mansion opened, Elira's heart whispered a question she could not answer. Whose life am I living? The Obade estate stood tall in Ikoyi, framed by manicured gardens and marbled pillars that gleamed under the Lagos sun. Elira stepped through the gate as Amma, her lace gown brushing polished floors, her face hidden behind coral beads. The wedding was small and traditional. No grand ceremony, no fanfare, just Rael, leaning on an ornate cane, and a handful of family elders who spoke more with nods than words. The groom barely looked at her. When he did, his gaze was unreadable. After the ceremony, Elira was shown to her new bedroom, luxurious but impersonal. Rael's room was on the opposite wing of the house. The staff, silent and efficient, referred to her as Madame Amma, a name that curled bitterly on her tongue. Rael remained distant. He didn't ask about her past or her dreams. He didn't touch her. He only appeared at dinner, where they sat on opposite ends of a long, cold table, exchanging polite sentences like strangers forced to share the same air. But Elira noticed things. The way Rael's footsteps echoed too evenly, too steadily for someone supposedly crippled. The way he would suddenly appear in places that would require stairs or long walks. The cane seemed more like a prop than support. Something was off, and as she watched him from a distance, her suspicion grew. The man I married isn't crippled at all, but why lie? Days turned to weeks, and Elira's life settled into a strange rhythm. Morning walks in the back garden, afternoon embroidery in her room, silent dinners under crystal chandeliers. Rael kept his distance, but was always watching, curious, calculating. She caught his eyes lingering on her as she read on the balcony, or when she helped the chef cut yam in the kitchen. He never questioned her identity, and she never offered the truth. They were both living inside a lie. One night, unable to sleep, Elira wandered through the corridor toward the inner courtyard. Through the glass, she saw Rael standing without the cane, pacing slowly, his posture firm, his limbs straight. Her breath caught. The cane was gone. Her suspicion was right. The man who had fooled the city into thinking he was injured could walk just fine. Before she could retreat, he turned and saw her. They stared at each other, caught between truth and silence. Elira said nothing and returned to her room. The next morning, a bouquet of hibiscus flowers was placed on her table with a card that read, "You saw me." No signature, no explanation. But the wall between them had cracked. What game was Rael Obade playing? And what role had Elira truly stepped into? That evening, Rael knocked on her door for the first time. He entered without the cane, walking confidently, like a man used to power. "You're not Amma," he said plainly. "I knew it from the first moment." Elira froze, her heart thudding in her chest. She had been discovered. But instead of anger, Rael's voice was calm, curious. "You didn't speak. You didn't lie with your mouth, only your presence." He admitted his secret first. The limp was fake. After a business betrayal nearly cost him his life, he had decided to disappear from the public eye. Faking the injury was his way of filtering people. The women who came to marry me wanted the name, not the man. But Elira had sat quietly during the introduction, watching Amma with tired eyes and no hunger. I saw truth in you, he said. So I chose the wrong name, but the right woman. Elira didn't confess everything, not yet, but she told him enough that she had no say in the arrangement, that she was coerced into taking Amma's place. He listened without judgment, just watched her with a softness she didn't understand. That night she couldn't sleep. For the first time her lies had met his, and strangely, they fit together. Could love grow in the soil of deception? The following mornings were different. Though still formal, the energy between Elira and Rael had shifted. He no longer carried the cane, and she no longer called him sir under her breath. They walked the gardens together, sometimes in silence, sometimes speaking of trivial things. Books, city traffic, the best suya in Lekki. Neither had acknowledged the full weight of their confessions, but it hung gently between them, like Lagos humidity undeniable, ever present. One afternoon, Rael invited her into a previously locked room on the second floor. It was a personal studio paintings leaned against the walls. Sketches of Lagos bridges and Makoko floating village lay scattered on the table. I used to paint before business swallowed me, he said, handing her a half-finished canvas. Now I only do it when I want to remember who I was before I became the Obadi name. Elira saw a vulnerability in him that no amount of money could cover. For the first time she saw him not as her captor, but as a man wounded by life in his own way. She told him about her dreams too, how she once wanted to open a small tailoring shop in Yaba, where women could learn to sew and sell. Dreams don't survive in Mamancha's house, she said, brushing her fingers over a bolt of fabric. Rael nodded but didn't press. Instead, he ordered a new sewing machine and had a room cleared for her designs. It wasn't an apology, it was an offering. Slowly, without labels or promises, something soft began to bloom between them. Trouble returned on a Saturday morning, loud and dressed in orange chiffon. Amma arrived at the Obadi mansion, escorted by Mamansia and two nosy aunties. They came with fire in their tongues and fake tears in their eyes. "This is a deception!" Amma screamed at the gates. "She stole my life, my marriage, my destiny!" Mamansia waved a legal document, threatening to sue for impersonation and defamation of character. Rael did not flinch. He stood beside Elira and addressed them calmly. "The marriage was registered under my authority. I knew who I was marrying. If anyone has committed deception, it was the people who sent Elira in another woman's name." He handed them a folder containing voice recordings, text messages, and signed statements evidence he had quietly collected. Amma's face drained of color. The aunties stepped back. Mama Nasia began to plead, but Rael had heard enough. Elira stood still throughout it all, shaking but silent. When the gate closed behind the three women, she burst into tears, not because she feared them, but because she had finally faced them without running. Rael didn't comfort her with words. He simply offered her a glass of water and stood beside her as she wept. For the first time in her life, someone had fought for her. And not just someone, a man who had once worn a mask, now choosing truth. The Obadis were invited to the annual Lagos Firelight Festival in Victoria Island, a celebration of Yoruba heritage, business excellence, and unity. Rael and Elira went together, dressed in matching white and gold aso-oak. She looked stunning, her gel towering like a queen's crown. Her steps steady. For the first time, he introduced her publicly as Elira, not Amma, and held her hand without shame. People stared, whispered, some smiled. She didn't care. At the event, politicians mingled with fashion designers. Celebrities posed for pictures. Elira felt out of place until Rael pulled her aside. "They don't matter," he said softly. "Tonight is for you and me." They danced under lanterns. The drums were loud, but her heartbeat was louder. In that moment, she realized she had stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. She had stopped feeling like a placeholder. When they got home that night, Rael didn't say much. He simply handed her a ring, a second one, slimmer, handmade, engraved with her real name. "This one's for the real bride," he said. Elira smiled through tears. It wasn't a grand romantic proposal, But it was something more rare in her life, genuine, intentional, and hers. Rael traveled to Ibadan with Elira to meet her father's extended family. They had heard rumors, but never known the full story. When Elira stood before them in a soft purple wrapper, head bowed with respect, the elders blessed her. "Your father would be proud," her uncle said, tears glistening. For the first time in years, she felt like someone's daughter again. A second ceremony was held traditional, intimate, and honest. No lies, no false names. This time, Rael paid the bride price properly, declaring his love for Elira, not Amma. Elira's aunt danced with joy, splashing perfume and laughing as women ululated in celebration. The entire courtyard echoed with prayers and palm wine songs. This time, Elira wore her name proudly, and it fit her like a second skin. Rael knelt before her and whispered, "Thank you for staying when you had every reason to leave." She whispered back, "Thank you for choosing the real me." In a world where wealth, power, and image dictated so much, they had found something untouched truth. And in Lagos, where even love had a price, theirs had been earned. Months later, Elira's House of Threads opened in Yaba. Rael had invested, but the vision was hers. The boutique offered sewing training to young girls, many from disadvantaged homes, and created modern African fashion that quickly caught attention across Lagos. Fashion bloggers called her the soft revolution. Elira simply smiled and kept working. Mama Nasia and Amma tried to make noise on social media, but the public had moved on. Elira never responded to their jabs. She had built something bigger than revenge. She had built a legacy. And Rael? He showed up at the store every Friday with snacks for the girls, unbothered by whispers. They called him Oga with the soft heart. They returned home each evening to quiet laughter, slow meals, and comfortable silence. They didn't pretend to be perfect. They argued sometimes. They got tired. But their foundation was truth, and in a city that never stopped performing, that was the rarest love of all. One rainy night, Elira lay on the balcony of the Obade home, listening to the soft Lagos thunder. Rael joined her with steaming cups of kunu. "You know," she said, "I don't think I was ever meant to be Amma." He chuckled. "Thank God for that," she smiled. "But I'm glad I walked through that door anyway, because it led me here." They talked about the future children maybe, travel perhaps, more businesses that uplift women, but more than anything, they talked about keeping each other grounded. No more lies, no more masks, just two people who had started in the wrong roles, but chosen to write the rest of the play together. Elira looked at her reflection in the glass and whispered her own name. Elira. Not a shadow, not a stolen identity. Just a woman who had learned to stand tall in her truth. And beside her stood the man who once limped by choice, now walking proudly at her side. In a city of secrets, they had chosen something radical. Honesty. The end. What did you think of the masked groom? Share your thoughts in the comments. Like this story? Share it with a friend who loves rich African romance and drama. Want more stories like this? Follow for the next one.